Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our webinar on best hiring practices before, during, and after making an offer. I'm Christiana, the COO at ClearPath Business Advisors. We are a consulting firm who believes business owners should build a healthy, sellable business, whether they plan to sell or not. Today, you'll be meeting our people strategy and hiring team, who will be discussing how you can make the most out of your hiring process from start to finish. Let's quickly go over how you can participate in today's session. First up, there's a Q&A button at the top. Feel free to use Q&A at any time. We'll be addressing your questions at the end of each section, so keep them coming. If you're shy, no worries. You can toggle the Post Anonymously button at the comment box if you wish to be anonymous while asking a question. Make sure your questions go to the Q&A section and not the chat. We'll be taking as many questions as possible, but also want to be respectful of time. So if we run out of time, we'll follow up with everything at the end. If you were one of the people who submitted a question in registration, we'll be sure to answer that at the end or follow up after as well. You can also use the chat button, which is right next to the Q&A button, where we'll be asking for responses in the chat and a great way to interact and make the best out of our time together. Lastly, you don't need to write everything down. We will follow up with the slides after as well. I'm excited to introduce you to our team. Today, our presenters will be Ashlyn Harrison and Candy Wang. The QR codes at the bottom of the screen will take you to their LinkedIn pages. So please feel free to reach out, take out your phones, and scan the codes to connect with them. Ashlyn is a people strategy and hiring consultant here at ClearPath, who has a Master of Science in Industrial Organizational Psychology, also known as IO Psychology. Candy is our people strategy and hiring specialist, who is months away from getting her master's in IO psychology as well. And we're honored to have special guest Scott Reeves join us today. Scott is a Vistage chair as well as a CEO and business owner coach, who also has a lot of expertise in these areas as well. Our people strategy team has placed over 300 candidates, so we're excited to share our expertise with you. Without further ado, I'll hand it off to Ashlyn.
Thanks for the introduction, Christiana. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us early on a Thursday. I'm Ashlyn, and I lead our people strategy and hiring department. As Christiana mentioned, I have a degree in industrial organizational psychology, which is also called IO psychology. And if you don't know what that is, you are not alone. It is a very long name. And while it sounds very confusing, it's pretty simple. Adam Grant, who is a relatively well-known IO psychologist, always says that IO psychologists, we study how to make work be not terrible for people. So I like that short explanation, but a longer way to explain that is that IO psychologists study and apply principles psychology to the workplace. So we really see employees as the largest asset that a company has, and we think of every business problem as a people problem. So through that lens, we try to understand human behavior and apply that understanding to improve the well-being and performance of people and the organizations that they're a part of. People spend a third of their life at work, so IO psychologists are just here to try to make that time as good as possible for employees. So our people strategy and hiring department can help you with all aspects of your company's talent, but today we are just going to be focusing on our hiring and retention expertise. So at ClearPath, we're pretty unique because we act as a full service talent acquisition team for our clients. We provide guidance every step of the hiring process, from defining a job to negotiating the offer letter. And we also offer consultation and training services to companies who have an internal hiring team to help improve them. So hiring top talent is not just an art, there's definitely a science to it. And during this webinar, we want to provide you with tools and resources that you can use before, during, and after a candidate has signed an offer letter. And these strategies should help you consistently define and align, attract, select, and retain top talent for any position in any organization. So what makes ClearPath different than some other firms is that all of our solutions that we're sharing today that we use in our consulting, they're all backed up by scientific research. So we know they work well, they're truly the best practices out there. And whether you work with us or any other team, we really encourage you to make sure that any hiring team you're working with has processes that are well-researched and scientifically backed. So let's get into it. So good hiring is, of course, one of the most critical decisions that a company can make. A great hire can, of course, significantly contribute to a company's success, and a bad hire can be costly and super disruptive. According to SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Management, a bad hire can cost 3 to 4 times the amount of an employee's salary. So if you hire someone making $100,000, that can be a $300,000 to $400,000 mistake. And you might think, okay, but this probably doesn't happen too often. But the the U.S. Department of Labor actually said that 74% of employers have said that they made a bad hire within the last year. So we are trying to make sure today that you walk away with some strategies so that you do not land in that 74% and are really getting the right people in the right seats. All right, so we're going to dive into the specifics, starting with common problems that we've seen our clients make before the job is even posted. Again, we've worked with we've placed over 300 people, so these are the most common things that we see. And in the chat, we would love to hear from you what are some of the most common problems that you've had before posting a job. So the most common mistakes that we have seen are people not having a internal process or alignment of expectations, a job description that doesn't really have defined roles or responsibilities, a lack of compensation analysis, and lastly, an unclear strategy for attracting candidates. So while many people might think that what you do before posting the job doesn't really matter much, we are here to argue that this is one of the most crucial phases. And here's why. So during this presentation, we are going to compare good hiring to the process of building a house. So just like a house needs a solid foundation to support its structure, a really good hiring strategy helps to define and align exactly what a job is really going to lay the groundwork for attracting the right people. So in short, if you don't have a good base, the rest of the hiring process is just really at risk of crumbling. And this section is going to be a bit longer than the rest of the others, and that's because it really is the most important. I was just on a webinar last week with 4 heads of talent acquisition from companies like Bright Hire and UKG, and they all agreed that in the hiring process, the setup is really the most important part. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So the quote that failing to plan is a plan to fail is absolutely true in recruiting. In fact, SHRM discovered that without recruitment processes, hiring efforts are 3 times less successful than those that are formalized and documented. On top of a great process, stakeholders must be aligned on the necessary knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are going to make a candidate successful. So when we say a stakeholder in this situation, it's really just anyone that has a vested interest or influence in the selection of a candidate. So stakeholders in the hiring process can include hiring managers, HR, leadership, etc. So we are going to now go over a process that we use to define exactly what success looks like and align expectations and attract the best fit. So hiring the right person, as we said, really starts with clearly defining and understanding the required tasks and responsibilities. So the very best way to do this is to do what's called a job analysis. So this is a really systematic approach that helps to identify and document all of the different tasks and competencies that someone's going to need to be a great fit. And then once we have those identified, we can use it to write a good job description, figure out what to look for on resumes, and pick the right selection tools. So job analysis is especially useful for changing new or unique roles, but it definitely is a little bit time consuming, and a full job analysis might not always be necessary. But you really shouldn't skip over doing a job analysis of some kind. So we are going to share with you our streamlined approach. So to do a faster but still really thorough process to define and align on a position, we use the SOAR methodology by Barry Deutsch. So SOAR stands for situation, obstacles, outcome, and results. So with our clients, we start by identifying the problem that the role is going to aim to solve. Next, we consider any potential obstacles that the new hire is going to face. Then we define what actions are going to be required to overcome those new obstacles and really help out the business. And finally, we figure out what tangible results we'll need to see so that we know the new hire is going to be a success. And then these results we write in 30, 60, 90-day goals, and those really act as success benchmarks. And on top of those 30, 60, 90-day goals, we want to make sure that those are written in a SMART format. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, just clearly outlining these results. It not only helps to get alignment, but it also helps to attract the right candidates. People, when they see goals needing to be accomplished in a certain time, are a much better judge of their skills because they are able to say, okay, I can do that within a month, or, maybe I should think again. But yeah, just being upfront in recruiting goes a long way. And then we can't get through this presentation without talking about AI. It's taking over the world as we know it, but it can be really helpful for a lot of parts in the hiring process. But this is definitely not a part that you should use AI for. It really misses a lot of the human nuance and your company nuance for what is going to be required to really make a person successful at your company. So please do not use AI for this step. We will note in other parts of the presentation when you can definitely use AI, but this is not the step to shortcut. And in the chat, if you would like a link to our hiring success blueprint, which is our master list of hiring questions, please just drop your name in the chat and we'll make sure we follow up with you afterwards. And so in addition to the skills required for a job, another great piece of this puzzle is understanding what natural tendencies might help a candidate fit a role. And while there are a lot of tools that claim to do this well, our favorite is the very scientifically backed predictive index assessment. And it really helps us to understand what is going to make someone naturally thrive in a role. So it's our favorite because it's validated in science and it's also legal to use in recruiting. That being said, a candidate's profile and is only really a piece of the puzzle, and we want to make sure that we're not solely basing any decisions on this data. But we can think of this data as really a behavioral map that identifies ideal traits for any position. So for example, let's say we want to hire a public accountant. PI's data suggests that the ideal candidate would fit within these orange boxes that you see at the bottom of the screen. And then you can see that my natural drives are in the circles that are labeled A, B, C, and D. So this data, it's more complicated, but essentially it's just telling us, okay, I am aligned with liking collaboration and consistency, but I'm really misaligned in detail orientation, and I would get sad not having a social outlet in this job. So we can see that I would make a pretty bad public accountant. In fact, PI will even give everyone a score on 1 to 10 for job fit, and I'm a 6. So don't hire me for your accounting. But another cool part of the predictive index is that we can take this data and design follow-up interview questions to really confirm these areas of misalignment, but also explore the gaps to see if there's maybe any hidden potential that the assessment was wrong about. And I'm going to hand off to Candy now.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. This is Candy. It's nice meeting you all, and thank you, Ashlyn, for starting us off. Like Ashley mentioned earlier, another common problems hiring managers encounter before hiring starts is really trouble writing a clear job description. A job description is really crucial because it can really help you attract the right candidates and give them an idea of what to expect for the job too. An unclear job description can actually lead to dissatisfied new hires, which can lead to potential turnover. According to 2022 Job Seeker Nation report, 41% of employees who left their job within the first 90 days actually said that they did so because the role was not as expected. So when you're writing a job description, it's really important that you think about it truly as your company's resume and value proposition. It can not only help you facilitate the hiring process, but it can also help serve as a guidepost for measuring candidates' future job performance. It can also help you assess compensation, as well as even be used to legally protect your company in case of disputes in the future. So let's talk about some key attributes to getting a job description right. Perfect. So when writing a job description, first it's really crucial that you remember to keep it clear and accurate. It's important that you clearly define the roles and responsibilities. So to determine this, you can use the 30, 60, 90-day goals, as Asha mentioned, or other information that you've identified during the SOAR process and your job analysis as a guide for you. Writing a clear and accurate job description can really help you avoid unqualified candidates applying, which can really save you time as well as save the candidates time. It's also really important that you keep your job description concise. I know it's very tempting to want to include as much information as possible on your job description, but candidates actually only spend an average of 63 seconds reading a job description. So it's really important that you keep it simple but impactful at the same time. Each descriptions look different depending on the role and depending on your company's needs. We've included some common components to include in a job description, but just remember every job description looks different and just only include the components that are important to you. Lastly, we cannot emphasize enough that it's really important to include a culture snapshot in your job description because that's really what will help differentiate you from other company and highlight what makes your company unique. Just like you want to hire the right candidates, new hires or candidates also want to find a company that will be a right fit for them. So when you're writing your cultural snapshot, just remember to avoid generic terms such as innovative, diverse, fun, but really give specific examples that highlight your company's vision and goals and how you typically support employees. So with job description, it's actually okay, or AI can actually be a really useful tool to assist you with writing a job description. But as Asha mentioned, just remember that you have conducted a thorough job analysis before using AI. And don't forget to really include important information such as a cultural snapshot.
Well, thank you, Candy. So as Candy mentioned, a good job description that really conveys culture is a big piece of the puzzle. Candidates, especially younger ones, are getting more and more selective about choosing companies based on their culture. But of course, we all have bills to pay, so compensation is also important and is definitely a significant motivator for most job seekers. 52% of candidates consider compensation as the most attractive aspect of a job. So therefore, it's really essential to make sure that we're accurately evaluating and offering competitive compensation packages to all of our employees. So, and we do this by performing compensation analysis. So it doesn't matter if you have the best job description in the world and the best culture ever, but if you are coming in below market value, you just won't get people applying. And here are a good list of free resources that you can use as a hiring team, or you can also use these if you are looking for a job and want to do some research. Another software that we like and we use with our clients is called Labor IQ. Unfortunately, this one is behind a paywall, but it's worth considering if you're serious about getting accurate data. And again, just make sure that whatever hiring team you work with, that they are doing this really crucial step. All right, so now that you have gotten to the point in your process before we post the job where you have defined the role, everyone's aligned on it, you've analyzed the compensation, so you are almost ready to post that job description. But first, we need to make sure that it not only attracts, but also resonates with the right candidates. So this may surprise you, but 55% of potential hires are actually turned off by jargon or buzzwords. And that's kind of counterintuitive to a lot of people. So let's explore some other practical ways that you can incorporate attracting candidates into your recruiting strategies. So the first thing is, instead of waiting for applications, some people call this like the post and pray method. We really want you to be taking a proactive approach. So actively source candidates, revisit past applications, and leverage employee referrals. So research has shown that people who have applied to your job before and also employee referrals often stay with companies longer, and they are high performing hires. So those are great places to go to. Also, research where to post. Each recruiting platform, whether that's Indeed, Monster, LinkedIn, etc., they all serve a different purpose. So LinkedIn, it's kind of more of a professional networking site than it is really used for recruiting, but it can be useful if you're trying to find a really niche role. On the other hand, Indeed is really valuable for a broader candidate search and if you want a role to get high traffic. But whichever platform you use, really make sure that your team is trained on how to use them effectively. For example, there are knockout questions that you can use to filter out folks that might not be a good fit, or parameters that you can set up to attract really good matches. And also think outside the box. Don't only use these more like mainstream recruiting platforms. Using professional organizations, sites, or social network is a great place to find people with a certain skill set or a certain interest. And then lastly, we want to make sure that job posts are written in a more conversational tone that resonates with candidates. Avoid that jargon, avoid using an overly like formal and stuffy tone, and always remember to proofread super thoroughly. You also want to refrain from terms like guru or rock star. This really doesn't give a candidate information to understand the qualities that you're like truly seeking. So instead you should use words like creative or analytical, skills that you actually want and that mean something. And then lastly, diversity of talent, we all know is important for so many different resources. So there are tools such as Total Jobs Gender Bias Decoder that are free, and they can help you notice hidden biases, like maybe you're accidentally, repelling women from applying instead of attracting them. So run your job through these scanners, and they can really help you out to build a much more diverse team.
So at this time, we wanted to take some questions for before posting the job description. Ashlyn, one of the questions that we had come through the chat was wondering how to get more information on the predictive index. And then maybe you guys could spend some time just mentioning good experiences or your experience with the predictive index.
Yeah, absolutely. So Candy and I both posted our LinkedIn QR codes at the beginning, but we'll post them at the end too. So if anyone wants more information, please get in touch with us. Yeah, we really like the predictive index. It has, hundreds of millions of dollars of research into it. It has been peer reviewed. It has a pretty strict scientific advisory board, and we really like it. And it's been very well validated. We see a lot of clients using, or not a lot of clients, but a lot of people out there using methods for personality and behavioral assessments that just aren't valid. So we love the PI. Please reach out to us if you would like any more information on it. We love to nerd out about it. And yeah, Scott, I'll hand it over to you. I think it'd be really helpful if you could share, your experiences with PI and how you've seen it help everyone that you've coached.
Sure. There's many of my CEOs that use this tool. As Ashlyn said, it is a terrific, easy for any applicant to do in less than 10 minutes. It's just real quick, and it will quickly identify the attributes that this person has aligned or not with the position. Like Ashlyn, you mentioned on the accountant, recently a production management position where it has a higher level of details, but the results immediately come in and says that's not their sweet spot. So they're not the right person for the seat. So lots of successes with this. And it also has an additional tool to it to go deeper. So if you haven't ever tried it, I encourage anyone on this webinar to do it. I'm sure Ashlyn can do it for you, and she'd be happy to.
And another question that we had come through was, do you think that it's a good idea to ask current employees to help, start drafting a job description? Is that a useful place to start?
Yeah, it's definitely important to, as part of the job analysis process, you can definitely leverage current employees, because sometimes the people who might be supervising or managing, they might not be fully in touch with everything that the job actually requires. So talking to current employees is a really, really good way to double check that your job description sounds accurate. And of course, this would be someone who has the same role as the role that you're hiring for. But even if it's a different role too, reaching out to employees that may be interacting with the role that you're trying to fill can be a really good way to make sure that you are accurately capturing who is going to be good at the job. Great question.
And I think we have time for one more that came through. What have you found that helps to attract neurodiverse candidates?
Yeah, so as far as neurodiversity, it really helps to make sure that you have a statement about equal employment opportunity. That is a good way to make sure that you are helping to attract not only neurodiverse, but just diverse candidates in general. Specifically, there are also different job boards or job sites that you can go to that are specifically for folks who identify as neurodiverse, and reaching out to those sources is a great place to check. There are companies such as, I believe Microsoft right now actually has a company initiative as well that they are actively pursuing candidates who are neurodiverse. So having diversity in any way, shape, or form is a great company value. And of course, you need to make sure that you're living that value and figuring out ways to find those populations and make sure that they are actively included once they are in your company.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And before we move on to the next section, if anyone wants to post in the chat their biggest takeaway, but Scott, I'd be curious to hear from you just on before the job posting, any big takeaways or advice that you have.
Yeah, one is to make sure that you really identify what the accountabilities will be for this position in bullet pointed form, and then to create activities, what this individual is going to need to do on a daily basis, once a week basis, once a month basis, once a quarter, and so on. So the activities that is expected of that person aligns with what they're accountable for, what their role responsibilities are, to make sure that it's will be an effective fit, and that person will then know what will be expected of him or her.
Perfect. Thank you. And Ashlyn, I think we're ready to move on to during the interview process.
Great, let's do it. Cool. So thank you guys for your questions. We really appreciate them. So great. Let's move on, as Christiana said, to what happens during the interview process, some problems that we see come up, and also some good solutions. So at this point, you have set up that great process, right? You've gotten a ton of amazing people to apply. You've used those accountabilities to guide you through reviewing resumes, and you are ready to start interviewing. We would love to know in the chat any common problems that you face during the interview process as well. So the most common ones that we see are a lack of interview techniques and training, a lack of awareness of HR laws, and candidates that are feeling undervalued. So going back to our house analogy, after you've built your house and you want to sell it or rent it, you have to stage it to wow potential buyers. So even a house with really good bones, it's not going to attract occupants unless it feels inviting, right? So your interview process is the exact same way. Candidates are not going to choose a company that leaves them feeling like they're kind of just filling a role, filling a vacancy. And also, just like homeowners are evaluating like where or who they want to occupy, they have to do their due diligence to find the best fit for them too. So it is a mutual search for the best fit. So we're going to go over how to create an interview experience that, makes people feel like they want to make your company their home.
Like Ashlyn mentioned, one of the most common problems we see during the hiring process is lack of interview techniques and training. So once you've identified potential candidates, it's really crucial that you ensure that your interview process is consistent and structured. Interviews are great predictors of future job performance. In fact, when done right, interviews have been shown to be the best predictor for future job performance. However, even so, many companies don't actually have a structured interview process and often give too much leeway to how interviews are conducted. Research actually suggests, though, that structured interviews predict performance 2 times better than unstructured ones, so really taking the time to ensure you have the proper interview techniques implemented is really important. What are the differences between structured and unstructured interviews? Well, with unstructured interviews, questions are typically not prepared in advance, they're spontaneous, and they're inconsistent between candidates. And because of this, unstructured interviews make it hard to evaluate candidates and are not typically a good measure for future job performance. On the contrary, structured interviews questions are prepared in advance and they remain consistent for all candidates. They are typically prepared beforehand, so you're really able to come up with predictive questions such as behavioral questions that can directly measure and predict job performance. Behavioral questions are basically questions that help to assess a candidate's actions or reactions in specific professional settings or situations. They really help you evaluate how the candidate has handled similar situations in the past. For instance, instead of directly asking about a candidate's leadership style, you might ask them to describe a time when they used their leadership skills to motivate their team or colleagues. Lastly, since questions are prepared beforehand, you're really able to gather that qualifiable data for each candidate, which allow you to compare them. In the next slides, we will discuss the process of creating and implementing interview scorecard into your structured interview process to help you best evaluate candidate performance during the interview. So an interview score guide is basically like a checklist that can help you or interviewers assess candidates' suitability for a job. It helps provide a more structured framework for evaluating candidates and allow you to compare between them. To create an interview score guide for a structured interview, first it's really important that you clearly outline the key competencies and skills needed for the role. This way you can develop questions that assess each of them. After that, you can create a scoring guide based on each question with defined criteria and performance level. So let's take the leadership question from the previous slide as an example. If you ask a candidate to describe a time when they used their leadership skills to motivate their team or colleagues, you can create a scoring rubric ranging from 1 to 5 for this question. Let's say if a candidate provides a response that is vague and lacks concrete examples, you may want to rate it as 1. However, if they provide a really specific example and showcase their leadership approach and the outcome of their actions, you may rate it as a 5. Lastly, we just really want to emphasize that it's really important that your process is consistent across company. So it's really important that you don't forget to train interviewers and hiring managers at the company on the process you've developed. If you don't already have an interview score guide and would like a sample of the one we use, please leave a comment in the chat and we'll be happy to send you one after the webinar. Lastly, we cannot stress enough that companies should be trying to get as many data points on candidates as possible in order to make the best decisions. On top of structured interview, here are some other great predictors that you can consider implementing to really help you best predict future job performance. For instance, if you're hiring an accountant, you may want to use a job knowledge test to assess if candidates know basic accounting principles. Or you may ask the applicant to provide a work sample, such as a balance sheet sample that they've done in the past, to really help them showcase that they have the specific skills needed to succeed in the role. On the other hand, if you're trying to see how candidate might handle certain work-related problems or issues, you can consider implementing a cognitive ability test to evaluate their problem-solving and critical thinking skills. Lastly, personality and behavioral assessments can be very useful tools to help you understand candidates' behavioral traits as well. Like we mentioned earlier, we love using the predictive index to help us dive deeper into candidates' behavioral traits. For example, shown in previous slide, if you're hiring for an accountant, you may really want to hire someone who is more precise and process-oriented. However, if the position you're hiring for is a sales manager position, they might not need to be as precise and process-oriented, but more extroverted. We just really want to emphasize, though, that when implementing a personality and behavior assessment for hiring, that you do your research and ensure that the tool and the assessment that you're using has been legally validated to be used for hiring. For example, like we mentioned, the predictive index, or another good one is the Hogan Personality Inventory. They're both good and have been legally validated to be used to predict future job performance and to be used for hiring. In the chat, let us know if you'd like to take a free predictive index assessment, and we would also love to send it to you after our webinar.
Thanks, Candy. Okay, so the next thing that we want to go over is just having some knowledge of HR laws. So whether you have a degree in HR or not, if you're doing hiring, need to be really aware of some common laws, not only to avoid, really big fines or embarrassing lawsuits, but we also want to make sure that we're building a fair and inclusive hiring culture. And this isn't just the hiring manager. As Candy mentioned, training on an interview process is really important, and it's really good to have a debrief with anyone who is going to be talking to the candidate before they speak with them, to make sure that they are aware of some of these laws. And while some of them seem common sense, 50% of people surveyed report that they have experienced job-based discrimination in the application process, which, seems straightforward, but there are a lot of people who are still accidentally breaking those laws. So let's go over some common ones that we think that people should be aware of. Let's go ahead and talk about our compensation range. So including a job salary range is crucial so that candidates know what to expect. And it's also now the law in California and other states like Colorado and New York. So the law in California actually went into effect in January of 2023. And it states that businesses have to post salary ranges on all of their job advertisements. And even if you're in a state where this is not currently a law. There is legislation right now that is attempting to make this federal. So starting to practice this now will make you way ahead of the curve. And also candidates are more likely to apply to jobs where they can see the salary range posted. And then next, we also would want to make sure that folks aren't asking how much someone currently makes. So it's illegal in California and 19 other states, but we also understand that you might want to know if the candidate is aligned with what your budget is. So instead, you can just simply ask like, hey, is our posted range in your ballpark? Are you comfortable sharing your bottom line with us? This gets the conversation going and it sets expectations earlier and saves everyone time. And then lastly, as we mentioned on the previous slide, it is definitely illegal to ask about someone's age or any questions that can reveal how old someone is. So that could be, hey, when did you graduate high school? How long have you been working in this field? And we also want to be careful with language and job descriptions that say things like seasoned. That's also just kind of indirectly maybe indexing someone's age. So for anything HR related, SHRM, as we have mentioned multiple times during this presentation, is a great resource for you to follow. They post things all the time, and the membership, if you're not a student, is about $245. But if you have a student that is working for you, then the membership is only $40, which is great. So next, we are going to go over candidates feeling a little bit undervalued. So this is a huge part of the recruiting process. And this essentially just refers to how a candidate is feeling through your interview experience. So surprisingly, 54% of candidates have actually abandoned a recruiting process solely due to poor communication from recruiters or employers. So it's really very important that we prioritize how someone is feeling. So a candidate's experience with you during the interview process is really the first impression that they are going to get about how they'll be treated. So you want to make sure it's a great first impression. And even though, even if recruiting is your job, we need to remember that candidates are very real people and center their feelings. So first, we want to avoid the misconception that candidates are desperate. There is a shortage right now of labor in the US, and no matter what the job market is like, top performers almost always have other options. So we need to make sure that they're valued so that you can stand out and be competitive. Also, your hiring process is a reflection of your company's commitment. So you want to make sure you're not treating it like a back burner project or jumping into it half-heartedly. We strongly encourage everyone before they start a recruiting process to make sure that they really have the time to invest. Otherwise, if you don't, it's okay. And it's just better to wait until you really have the time. Otherwise, you're likely going to be spinning your wheels. As far as communication goes, there's really no magic number for how often or when you should communicate with a candidate, but we try to go by a few simple rules. So we always want to set clear timelines. We really err on over communicating versus under communicating. We communicate really often, even if it's just to say, hey, we don't have news yet. And lastly, we always follow up when we say we will. We give all of our placement surveys at the end to see how their experience was with us. And we often hear how much they appreciate how communicative we are, because sadly, that is just not the norm. And then lastly, a quick call with constructive feedback really goes a long way. So sadly, 70% of candidates receive no feedback after being rejected. And because so many employers forget this step, it can really make you stand out. So feedback makes people 4 times more likely to apply in the future. And so even if they may not have been a fit now, they could be the perfect fit for a future opportunity.
Sorry, we just had quite a few questions come through. I'm going to start with one. Ashlyn, what are your thoughts on a longer interview process or a process with a lot of components discouraging a candidate?
So really, really good question. People often think like, oh no, if I ask the candidate to do too much, I'm going to lose them. They're going to go with someone who has an easier interview process. And research shows that this isn't the case. Candidates actually really like to they like to know that they're signing up essentially for a company that is vetting their employees well, right? That makes your company look great. It makes them feel like they are a part of a really selective group rather than kind of feeling like, they might hire anyone. So it really does reflect well on the company, and there's no research to show that candidates are going to abandon it if you're asking, to do too many things. However, you don't want to drag it out too long. And I think a really important part of this question too is whatever you give candidates, you need to make sure that it's job relevant and that candidates understand, okay, we are asking you to do this as part of our interview process because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Where candidates do get really frustrated is if you're asking them to do tons of things and they don't understand how it's related to the job at all. So if you're using more things is totally fine. Obviously you want to be considerate of everyone's timeline, but as long as you make sure that it's job relevant, candidates really appreciate it and it reflects well on your company.
And Scott, from a business leader perspective, what are your thoughts on having multiple components to an interview, testing for skills, stuff like that?
I think it's critical. And I think you can do it in a streamlined fashion as long as you pre-prep. And by that, I mean you pre-prep exercises for the candidate to go through and show me how you did this sort of situation or solve this situation, so that you go through several of those interviewing processes where he proves or she proves that they can do the types of job that you're looking for. And so I think from a timeline standpoint, you can really make it streamlined if you're prepped.
Awesome, thank you. And just for the sake of time, I think that we can move on to the next section. If we have time at the end, we'll address some of these other questions, or be sure to address them at after the webinar as well.
Okay, great. Sounds good. And thank you everyone for the questions. Again, we will follow up with everyone. We're going to put out like a nice FAQ doc, but hopefully we'll have some time at the end too. So, all right, so let's move into our final phase, which is signing the offer letter. Or sorry, after people sign the offer letter. So at this point, you've done a really good job finding the right person, and you've used all of these strategies. So you have treated them super well, and they're really excited to sign your offer and start. But securing a candidate really doesn't end with them signing on. It's kind of truly just the beginning. A great post-offer letter experience from seamless onboarding to ongoing communication is super key for retaining this person that you just worked so hard to get to join your team. And we would really love to know in the chat, what are some of the most common problems that you have after someone signs that offer, like maybe in the first 90 days, just right as people are getting going. So the most common mistakes that we see right after the offer letter are the following. So ineffective or lack of onboarding process, managers that aren't set up for success, or new hires that are not set up for success. So back to our house analogy, after a house is sold or rented and you find the perfect residence, they are not going to stay without that ongoing maintenance, right? So just, like a leaky faucet, or if a door is broken, feeling ignored or left without resources can really drive the best people out the door. So similarly, after hiring, all of your attention needs to go into retaining them. So just like we've all probably had an unresponsive landlord that can drive us away, neglecting employee needs does lead to turnover, especially in our current job market where good talent is good to find. So, just like it's inconvenient to find a new house, but if it's terrible, you're going to leave, even though it's a little bit of an inconvenience. So we just want to make sure that people are really happy and they have chosen your company as their professional home for a reason, and you want to keep them there. So after they do sign, it's no time to rest, truly. The first 30 to 90 days is the best time to make a solid impression that is going to engage your new hire. And this time also really confirms that both of you have made the right decision. So effective onboarding process boosts new hire retention rates by 82%, which is so much. However, only 12% of employees agree that their organization has a good onboarding process. So there's lots of work for all of us to do in this process. So let's go ahead and dive into it. And onboarding could be a whole other webinar, but we're just going to go over a couple of things that we see. So the first mistake that we see is with people's onboarding process is them not having one. The second mistake that we often see is people saying, oh, like someone's onboarded, we gave them the new hire manual, they have all their equipment, they're good to go. Onboarding is definitely not just a manual. It is a really strategic process that you do not want to wing. You should really be crafting a step-by-step process that's based on best practices. And you don't need a fancy HR system to do this. They're great, but you don't need one if it's just not in your company's culture to have it. Even just by creating a Excel checklist, that is a great way to have people assigned to tasks and assign them due dates. And it just makes sure that everyone is consistent. Templates really help to keep things smooth for you and for your new hires. And then next, as we talked about, so many people are unhappy with their onboarding process in their company. So it's really important that you evaluate yours in your company. We want to, make sure that we are consistently improving. There's a really good quote of what doesn't get measured doesn't get improved, and onboarding is the same. It should be thriving on feedback, and you want to regularly get insights from your new hires to fine tune and improve your process. And we actually do have a master template on Excel that's based on best practices that we use. And if you would like us to email that to you, please drop your name in the chat and we'd be happy to share. And then next, we see a lot of unprepared managers. So successful onboarding, it goes beyond the checklist and it really hinges on manager involvement. You might wonder why. Some of you might not wonder why, but 82% of Americans surveyed said that they would consider leaving their jobs due to their manager. It's true, people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. We hear that all the time, but it's obviously very, very true. And in addition to this statistic, Forbes just came out with a recent research piece that said that a manager can actually have just as much impact on an employee's mental health as their partner, which is huge. So simply put, managers matter, and we want to make sure that they are prepared to interact with their new team members so that we can leverage that relationship, which is truly one of the best retention strategies that you do have. So before you throw your new hire just into the deep end, you want to make sure that their manager is there to be their lifeboat. So equipping them with insights from debriefs with the hiring team can help them get to know their new hire before they've even started. Behavioral assessment data is another really powerful tool that can help managers know exactly what strategies are going to work best with different people. We love the predictive index relationship guide and management strategy guide, and we've found that this really helps people assimilate a lot smoother into teams and the company culture. And then next, we really want to sustain that momentum that we have established with those 30, 60, 90-day goals. You can see that that's a really consistent thing through each step of our hiring phase is really referring back to these goals. They act as a foundation for success and really are a roadmap for the new hires' progress and ensuring that they stay on course. We can kind of use this to say like, okay, they're not going to make their 30-day goals. How do we step in to make sure that they're trained and not overwhelmed? And then last, we just want to make sure that you don't fall into patterns of infrequent feedback. It can definitely lead to disengagement and uncertainty. We advocate for weekly check-ins and, it's more than just kind of checking up on tasks. They can really foster a great relationship and you can stay on top of challenges and also celebrate success.
Perfect. So like Ashlyn mentioned earlier, the hiring process doesn't just end when the offer letter is signed. It's really crucial that, you not only support the managers up for success, but you also set the candidates up for success. In fact, according to SHRM Workplace Learning and Development Report, 55% of employees actually said that they need additional training to perform better. And really having someone feel overwhelmed and underprepared when you first hire them can drive them away. In fact, 20% of turnover actually happens the first 90 days. So here are some do's and don'ts to really ensure that you help set your new hire up for success. It's really important that you don't forget to train them and provide feedback. A lot of companies think that by shadowing other employees, the new hire will eventually catch on, but this is really risky and isn't always the case. It's really important that you use the 30, 60, 90-day goals plan in advance to help you ensure managers are scheduling weekly meetings and check-ins on new hires. It's also really important that you don't leave new hires out of goal setting. Providing employees with that autonomy can really help them feel a sense of purpose and significance, which can help increase their motivation, engagement, and loyalty. Lastly, we really want to emphasize that it's really important to not silo the candidate. A new job is really a massive change for many people, and they really need the support. So ensure that they have someone to go to that's not just their direct manager is really important. You can consider assigning a mentor to the new hire. Research actually suggests that employees with mentors have 50% higher retention rates than those that don't. And really taking these steps to help set new hires up for success can really not just benefit the employees, but also help you retain future top talents.
Thank you, Ashlyn and Candy. And for the respective time, I'll throw one question at you, but I just wanted to thank everyone before, if people jump off right now, just thank you for participating. We will send out these slides and you'll have our contact information if you have even more questions. And if we didn't address a question you asked, we will for sure follow up. But one question I was going to ask you too quickly is, what is the average time that someone could expect to take to hire and onboard someone? And do you have a recommendation who should be responsible for that?
Yeah, so another very good question. So the average time from a first interview to a job offer is around like 3 to 4 weeks, but we really can't stress how fast the process moves. In some situations, I've honestly seen a delay of like 12 to 24 hours in a response to a candidate be the difference between whether or not a candidate accepts a position. But in that case, that's why it's so important that you leverage that employee experience, right? So typically, when we're hiring, we have good enough rapport with the candidates that even if they get another offer, they're normally willing to wait to see if the other offer for our company is better, just because we have given them such a good experience. So that's just another thing to just be really mindful of. And then as far as who should be responsible for it, that's really going to depend on the different company. It's going to depend on who you have on your team, whether or not that's like a hiring manager, an HR department, or a specific recruiting team. But if you just make sure that you have a template where you can assign those clear roles and responsibilities, that should help guide everyone. Yeah, and Candy, I'll hand it off to you if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I think it's just important to emphasize that, whoever ends up being in charge of onboarding the new hires, that you ensure that they're constantly checking in on the new hires, like I mentioned earlier. Really setting up the new hires up for success is really important, especially the first 90 days, because a lot of turnover actually happen within the first 90 days. So just ensuring that, whoever's onboarding, to really help them goal set and really check in on their 30, 60, 90-day goals to really, help you evaluate how they're doing, as well as, providing them feedback with any areas of improvement.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And thank you everyone for attending and supporting ClearPath and being here. We will be following up not only with the slides, but if you requested some of the templates, we will be getting those to you as well. And again, we really appreciate your time this morning. And Ashlyn and Candy, we really appreciate yours as well.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. We really appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you so much.